This case takes place in Wales, so please do bear with me when it comes to pronunciation. In May 2017, Redvers Bickley and Tyler Denton started living together at 6 Llys Aderyn D in Rhyl. Their living arrangements were that of the housemates. It was platonic. They were sleeping in separate bedrooms. This wasn't the first time that they'd lived together. They'd been doing so for quite some years. They were good friends. In fact, so much of good friends that quite a few people have said they were like brother and sister. Tyler had lived with Redver and his family in both Wrexham and in Tenerife, so she really were like a part of his family. On Saturday the 9th of September 2017, Tyler were having a girls' night in to celebrate her girlfriend's 25th birthday. In all, there were Tyler, her two sisters, Shannon and Cody, and of course her girlfriend, Rhyl. Together, the girls were having a good laugh and a giggle. They had some food and drink, they watched a popular TV show X Factor, and listened to some music. They apparently even had a balloon fight, but in all, they were just chatting, taking selfies, and having a good time. Redvers had been out drinking, but when he got home, there was this constant presence of his that was making everyone feel a bit awkward, so at about 11 PM, they decided to go out for a drive. They went to Gwenarsgaw Hill viewpoint. I mean, I know I said that they'd been drinking, but I assume one of them weren't drinking. Even if they were, let's not get focused on that. While they were gone, Redvers were left sat in the house, feeling left out and feeling a bit resentful. Now this would be a great time to do the disclaimers. Remember, this is a true crime case. It's a real story involving real people. Them real people have real families. So although I do want you to share it, and I do want you to comment, please do so with sensitivity. So while Redvers is sat at home festering away because he's been left out, a bit like a child, he decided to look through Tyler's iPad. Now what a lot of people don't know is that not only is it unethical to look through someone else's digital devices or digital apps, accounts, whatever, it's actually illegal as well. In the UK, if you go on someone else's phone, even if it's unlocked, or if the Facebook's open and you just have a quick flick through it, if you haven't got permission to do that, it's breaking the law. At base, you can get done for computer misuse. It's technically hacking. Yeah, even if it's unlocked. But it does also open the door for other charges. Anyway, back to the case. While he's flicking through Tyler's iPad, he finds some messages to Rhyl about him. Seeing these messages only made him feel worse. He got wound up, he got angry, he got upset. Then when Tyler and her friends got back to the house at 11:30, Redvers had smashed a glass and was reluctant to let them in. But they did get back in. There was blood on the front door, on a light switch, and on the carpet. As everyone starts to clean up the mess, Tyler is obviously not very happy with Redvers, and it's really showing. She tells him to go to bed, and in response, he walks out the house, slamming the door behind himself. He returned a short while later. He sat on the stairs and placed his head in his hands. At this point, Cody was sat on the sofa, and everyone was talking about leaving and getting ready to go. Then Redvers stood up, and he said, "Let's begin," in like a weird, deep voice. He walked over to Cody. He grabbed her and pulled her back. He scraped her face with a knife and left a cut on her cheek. The attack came out of nowhere, and Cody fell to the ground. At first, nobody realised that Redvers had used a knife, but it weren't all that long before everyone started to realise what had happened. Tyler and Shannon went to help Cody. Shannon pushed Redvers away, and he stumbled back onto the TV. A scuffle broke out, and all four women tried to leave the house. As they did, Redvers stabbed Shannon in the back of the head, knocking her to the floor. Then as Shannon got up and ran out of the house, she saw Cody and Tyler on the floor, outside, with Redvers on top of them, attacking them. In fears, Shannon continued to run. Rhyl ran with her, and as they were running to the entrance of the cul-de-sac in which Tyler lived, they were screaming, "He's got a knife! He stabbed us!" Shannon ran to the door of an house right in front of her. She was running as fast as she could, but Redvers was chasing her. He caught up with her and he threw her to the floor. Then he started stabbing her to the head, the back, arm and neck. While doing so, he's saying, "Red's revenge, Red's return." The attack on Shannon were very controlled. He knew where he wanted to stab her. His jabs were targeted. He clearly had the intention of killing her. His final stab was to the back of Shannon's neck. At that point, she pretended to be dead. And it worked. Redvers thought that he'd killed her, so he stopped attacking her and left her. As he left, she then used a mobile phone to phone her dad. She said, "Dad, help us. Red has stabbed everyone. We're dying." Before the call ended, her dad told her to phone the police. But she didn't get a chance to call the police because she heard Redvers coming back. He was still saying the same thing. Red's revenge, Red's return. With no other viable option, Shannon hid in a bush. And luckily that worked as well. Redvers did walk in front of the bush, but he couldn't see her. A window opened in a house nearby. Shannon was taken in and given help, and the police were called. Redvers walked down the cul-de-sac and found Cordy and Tyler. They'd been banging on doors of neighbours' houses, screaming and shouting, trying to get help. Tyler was, as you'd expect, covered in blood. A neighbour, Matthew, was looking out the window. He described Redvers standing behind Tyler with his hands on her neck or shoulders. It looked like he were gripping or shaking her. Matthew then saw Redvers move past Tyler and lunge towards Cordy, leaving Tyler to fall to the floor. Cordy went to help Tyler on the ground, but Redvers leant over them as if he was punching one or both of them. From Matthew's perspective, he could see Redvers' shoulder moving, he could see his body moving, he could see his arm coming forward. From his perspective, he couldn't be quite sure, but it looked like he was beating one of them up or beating both of them up. As Redvers left, Matthew could see Cordy desperately trying to drag Tyler between some trees and some plant pots. It was as if she was trying to hide her in case he came back. Matthew went downstairs to help. He opened his front door, and Cordy was stood there in front of him, covered in blood. She obviously pled for help, but then they heard Redvers coming back. It was making the same growling noise which he'd been heard making before. Redvers came towards Cordy, and it was his fist, or what seemed like his fist, came down towards Cordy, making a loud punching noise. Another neighbour, Dennis, also described something similar. He saw Redvers appear from the entrance of the cul-de-sac. He was walking with purpose towards Tyler and Cordy, and growling like an animal. He then saw Redvers bent forward and raining blows down with both hands on either someone smaller than him or someone on the floor. Redvers then walked past Dennis's house, only to walk back quickly and again with purpose, still growling and grunting. Redvers went through a gap in the conifer trees, and then there was more screams. It was then that a vehicle pulled onto the cul-de-sac. It was Tyler, Shannon and Cody's dad, Paul. He'd been at home when Shannon had called him, and he'd instinctively drove to the address. He parked outside Tyler's house, and parked in a way that he was blocking the entrance of the cul-de-sac. He could see that the front door was open, but he couldn't see anyone inside. Then he heard Cody screaming, "Dad, we're over here!" He then ran deeper into the cul-de-sac, towards Cody's voice. She was still in the bushes at house number 4. Paul saw Redvers on his knees on the floor. Tyler was on the floor, and Cody was stood over her. Redvers was to Cody's right, about a foot or so from her head, and he was still making grunting noises. To Paul, it looked like Redvers was stabbing himself in the chin. Then Redvers noticed that Paul was walking over, so Redvers jumped to his feet and moved towards Paul. He was lunging at him, but he missed. In defeat, Redvers turned around and started walking back towards Tyler and Cody. So, what would you do if you was a dad in the situation? Paul ran and jumped on Redvers' back. Redvers hit him in the head as Paul tried to tackle the knife off him. And while this scuffle was taking place, Redvers is telling Paul that if he wants him to stop, he's going to have to kill him. But with assistance from Cody, he did manage to get the knife. And it was about that time that Redvers just kind of ran off. When the police arrived, Cody was covered in blood. She approached them with the knife from the attack and placed it on the floor, just before she fell to the floor herself, and that's where the police gave her first aid. Paul was also covered in blood, and Tyler was laid on the floor, unresponsive. She had injuries all over her body, and was given first aid by the police, and then by the paramedics. She was taken to Glencloyd Hospital in Bodle but she died shortly after. That were at 31 minutes past 1 in the early hours of the 10th of September 2017. The details of Redvers' timeline from after he left the scene aren't all that clear, but shortly after midnight he tried to call his mom and told her partner, "I've done something stupid. I love you. Tell the kids I love them." At some point after that, Redvers handed himself into police, but it was only after that he'd been cornered in an electricity substation on Dysurf Road. During his arrest, he appeared calm and had a wound to his neck. When he was arrested, he was asked about his injuries, and he made it very clear that he was more interested in knowing whether Tyler was dead. He said something to the effect of, "It doesn't matter about me, what's important is them." He went on to say such things as, "I confess to murder, 3 degrees, and bodily harm on 4, as well as, I could die, and that's justice. And, you shouldn't look after me, I killed someone." He also told police, "If you knew how hard it was to love someone and not have them love you back, and I'm going to live, that is not justice." In police interviews, he said that he didn't remember stabbing Tyler or Shannon, and that everything was a blur after he first attacked Cody. In court on the 27th of October 2017, there were gasps from the public gallery as Redvers entered his not guilty plea. Care to guess why you pled not guilty? On what grounds? Anybody? Yeah, it's diminished responsibility time. Redvers claimed diminished responsibility by abnormality of the mind and tried to attribute what he did to schizotypal disorder. During the trial, Redvers didn't dispute stabbing Tyler, Cody, Shannon, or Paul. He did, however, maintain that he had no recollection of stabbing Tyler or Shannon, but accepted that he must have done so. His evidence was that he got up from the stairs, walked over to Cody, and stabbed her in the neck. He didn't know why, he didn't feel hatred or anything like that. He just didn't know why he did it, but he did do it. He claimed to remember stabbing her twice, and he knew that where he'd stabbed her was a vulnerable part of the body. But again, he said he didn't know why he did it. Apparently, his next memory after that was around the corner of the house, on the street. He was walking away. He stopped and he saw his hands, and they were covered in blood, so he thought he needed to go back and check on Tyler. He constantly claimed that he had no recollection of stabbing either Tyler or Shannon, and that he had no recollection of attacking anybody outside the house. He did remember going back to find Tyler. She was curled up and said, "I'm dead now." He said that she was covered in blood, and apparently at that point he realised that he must have stabbed her. He was asked if he felt like he'd acted as himself during the attacks, and of course he said no, that's not who he is, I'm not a violent person, that type of thing. But he also said if it weren't for his alter ego James, he couldn't conceive of circumstances where he'd have done anything like that. Yeah, the good old blame the alter ego. He denied any intention to kill or cause Tyler Denton any serious harm. He also told the court something that nobody had known previous, and that was that he'd had a sexual relationship with Tyler from 2013 to 2015, but he'd only ever told one friend, and they were never committed to each other. He went on talking about his alter ego, saying that he's got a good side and a bad side, and in the week leading up to the murder, his bad side, let's not forget by the way his bad side's called James, he's saying that his bad side got stronger and took over. He explained that he first noticed this secondary character in his mind at the age of 4, and it had become more pronounced in his teenage years. I just felt there was this part of me that was different. It got to a point where I had to give it a name to differentiate it. He went on to say that this voice would tell him what to do, and it had time to hurt people, and the voice in his head were fighting over who had control of me. In the weeks leading up to the attack, he said that it was like it was getting stronger. I felt I was losing the fight against him. But the prosecution said no, he knew what he was doing. He knew what he was doing when he dressed in black, took a flick knife and adopted the persona of a man who growled and grunted as he carried out the attack. The prosecution said to the court, look, Redvers is absolutely obsessed with Tyler. He's even taken pictures of her sunbathing in Tenerife without her permission and stored it on his iPad. And I just want to clarify here, it's reported differently by different sources. Some claim that he took the photos without her knowing, and others claim that he took them off her iPad without her knowing. Either which way, he's got these photos and they're saying that she didn't know he's got them, he stole them. The prosecution also presented this notebook to the court that they'd found in their house. In this notebook, there were entries written by Redvers that said, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. My younger self was so full of morals, things he would not do, lines he would not cross. I've crossed them all. There can be no rules or lines. If you are to be truly free, you must be willing to do whatever it takes to make the world a better place. It becomes easier once you separate yourself. Become two people in a way. One persona to blend in, and the other to do unspeakable things that must be done. The psychiatrist said Redvers really hoped to have a relationship with Tyler, but the situation frustrated him, and that were exacerbated when he weren't invited out on the drive, and then even more so when he saw the comments about himself. The psychiatrist also said that Redvers suffered from a mental disorder that significantly impaired his ability to control himself, saying his relationships were marked by his expectation that other people are going to harm him. His rage was more frequent and intrusive leading up to the offences. It was also made clear in court that Redvers had always told himself no matter how many times he fails, he will always try to take his own life. And apparently he did try on that night. The post-mortem showed that Tyler was stabbed 8 times. She died of massive blood loss, particularly from a cut to the neck which severed a major artery. Cody wasn't told how many injuries she had, as medical staff said they lost count, although one of the wounds to her neck had been potentially fatal. And I'm sorry, but I don't know Shannon and Paul's injuries, but I have mentioned a few injuries that they sustained during this case. The jury rejected Redvers Bickley's claims of diminished responsibility, as they returned guilty verdicts for 1 count of murder and 3 counts of attempted murder. He bowed his head in the dock, but didn't show any signs of emotion. In sentencing, the judge recognised that technically Redvers had taken the knife to the scene, and therefore the starting point for his minimum term must be 25 years. Interestingly, the judge said that if he hadn't taken the knife outside, that might have been different. In regards to aggravating factors, there weren't any, which I find quite amazing, but the judge did talk about a significant degree of planning and premeditation, and said that that didn't exist. Although it weren't a spontaneous attack, it weren't a significant degree of planning and premeditation, which I know a few of you are going to argue against. But that's what the judge said, and I think the judge was focusing on the word of significant, but there you go. There were mitigating factors though. The judge recognised that Redvers had a mental disorder or disability which lowered his culpability. Redvers' age was also a mitigating factor. He was 21 years old at the time. He was a clean character, which is the judge's words, not mine. His admission of responsibility, although he did deny murder, and the fact that Redvers had shown obvious remorse. With all that being said, Redvers' minimum term were dropped to 22 years. However, the judge then increased the minimum term because of the 3 attempted murders. So Redvers Bickley was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 30 years. Now, this case, I know, is a case where I haven't been able to find much about anybody, and I'm really sorry about that, but I can only find what there is to find. However, there is information that I didn't include at the beginning. Tyler Denton is one of 5 children, 3 girls and 2 boys. It's reported that she first met Redvers when they worked for a cleaning company run by his mom. It's reported that Redvers went to work for KFC. It's also reported that Tyler then went to work as a cleaner at Cheshire Oaks shopping park, and that's where she apparently met Haley. They developed a close friendship, which then became a relationship. In a victim impact statement read out to the court, Paul, Tyler's dad, said, "I hate myself for not being able to save Tyler. I feel guilty for smiling. I hate feeling that I can't protect my family anymore. I hate remembering that night and having to go through it over and over again. Our hearts have been ripped out. Our daughters feel sad, unhappy, guilty, scared and angry. I will never see Tyler walking down the aisle to get married or have kids. I am so angry that Tyler's 25 years have been taken for nothing. Words aren't enough." In a statement read out by police outside Mould Crown Court, the family said, "Tyler didn't get the justice he deserved. It should have been a longer sentence, but he's been put away and can no longer destroy another family, as he has ours. We now have the challenge of rebuilding our lives, with a piece of us all missing." Cody said, "I still can't be alone anywhere. I have never been alone since the attack. I'm scared someone will come and get me and attack me again. I'm not sure if I will ever be able to be alone again. I can never turn the events of that night off in my head, and it's a continual nightmare for me. I am her big sister, and I could not save her. I tried my best and all I could, but it wasn't enough. I have to live with that every day. She was my little sister. I miss her dreadfully. It has devastated all of us. We will never be the same again. That's all I've got for you." And you know, it's the same story over and over again, isn't it? A stupid little boy that takes a life just because he feels like he's not going to be able to be with the person that he loves. This case is so horrific. It really is like a horror film. And not only do the victim's family have to live with not having their loved one anymore, having their loved one stolen from them, but they were also such a big, scarring part of the attack. My heart goes out to them so much. I can't even bear to imagine the impact of something like this. And I almost didn't do this case for that exact thing. This case happened 6 years ago, and the last thing I want to do is bring a traumatic event back to these people. So this case has been sat on my request list for ages, because it was a case that I thought should be covered, but I really didn't want to cover it. And then I remembered why I do this. And I haven't been able to pay much tribute to Tyler, but that's one reason I do it. The other reason I do it is because people like Redvers Bickley, whatever his name is, Redvers Bickley, should never be forgotten. And I don't mean in the same way with Tyler. Obviously, Tyler should never be forgotten in a great way, but Redvers should never be forgotten for what he's done. It's quite possible, if the parole board allows it, he'll be out when he's 50. And when he comes out, we shouldn't allow that he can carry on with his life. Everybody should know what he's capable of and what he's done. When somebody searches his name, they should know the type of person he is. And that is why I do this, as well as trying to pay tribute. But like I said, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you more about Tyler, because like I say, if it's not there, it's not. And I don't want to dig too deep when there's that sort of situation, because quite often when there's not that much information, it's because the family aren't putting it out, and I don't want to invade anyone's privacy, you know. So I don't dig too deep, if there's not much on the surface. My love massively goes out to them as a whole, and it really does seem like I end every single video like this these days. There is no advice for this, but I do want to say something that somebody put in the comments the other day. They didn't word it like this, but basically, distance is a much better remedy for a broken heart than murder is. If someone's broke your heart, if you miss somebody, whatever, killing them is going to ruin your life, their life, the family's life. It's really not worth it. Move away, find someone better, find someone who's a better match for you. If you're not together, it's for a reason. Seriously, murder is not the right way to go about it. You can get over people. And seriously, if they don't want to be with you, it's not meant to be. Your true match is out there somewhere. Don't murder people, guys. Come on. Don't abuse people. I'm good. All I'm saying is, I love you. Take care of yourself. Take care of those around you. And I'll see you next week. Bye.